The Council had always prided itself on maintaining order, watching over countless civilizations with the steady hand of authority. They'd observed races rise and fall, their fates sealed by their adherence to the strictest protocols. But they had never witnessed anything quite like this. The day humanity's polite mode turned off, they would never forget. It started as a simple communication, a routine message sent to Earth's representatives in the Galactic Senate. The Council had seen these reports before humanity was eager, optimistic, but always compliant. They'd been a quiet member, almost too eager to please, always with a smile, always ready to follow the rules. But today, something was different. The message from Earth's delegate came through without the usual politeness, without the warm, diplomatic tones they had come to expect. It was brief, direct, and something in it set off a chain of events no one could have predicted. At first, the Council dismissed it as a technical glitch. Maybe the representative was simply tired or had missed a few training sessions on diplomacy. But as the transmission continued, something shifted. The message wasn't just blunt, it was cold, it was sharp. The words were precise, calculated, and there was a certain finality to them, like a door slamming shut in a room full of fragile glass. The Council tried to keep control, their leaders quickly attempting to patch into the feed. They asked for clarification, for more information. But what came through next was far more disturbing. The message wasn't just one way anymore. Earth's representative had hacked into their communication channel, sending them a live feed. And on that feed, the Council watched in stunned silence as humanity's polite mode was shut off in real time. What followed was the beginning of something the Council had never considered, an expression of humanity's true strength, stripped of all the pleasantries that had kept their image pristine. This wasn't the kind of strength the Council was used to, the kind that bent to the will of those in power. No, this was raw. This was unfiltered. A figure stepped forward into the frame, a simple human, no special armor, no fancy weapons, just the face of someone who'd had enough. They didn't need to shout or threaten. The glare in their eyes said it all. Their message was clear. Humanity would no longer follow the Council's rules. Not after everything they'd been through. Not after the betrayals, the secrets, and the constant undermining of their species. For the first time in centuries, the Council felt fear. But it wasn't the kind of fear they could easily control. This was different. This was a fear of something they couldn't understand. The silent promise that followed was even more chilling. Earth would no longer be the obedient child in the galaxy's playground. They were ready to fight for their freedom, to unleash a fury none of the other races had ever seen. And just as the transmission flickered out, leaving only a lingering, uneasy silence, the Council knew something they hadn't dared admit before. They had underestimated humanity. But that was only the beginning. What happened next would shake the foundations of the galaxy forever. For the Council, it was almost unthinkable. They had watched humanity from a distance for centuries, their every move analyzed, their every interaction with other species scrutinized. The humans had been compliant, predictable even, in their efforts to join the galactic community. Their once quiet presence in the Senate was hardly a blip on the radar. But now, everything had changed. In a matter of moments, humanity had gone from a passive participant to a force the Council could not control, and the feeling was unsettling. The Council's vast network of spies, diplomats, and scholars immediately went to work, searching for answers. What had triggered this shift? Was it something the human race had been planning all along, or had they been pushed too far by the injustices they had endured over the years? The more the Council dug, the more they uncovered, but nothing made sense. Humanity's sudden change in behavior didn't seem to follow any logical pattern. No warning signs, no signs of rebellion, just a sudden, sharp turn. The Council's greatest minds huddled together, deliberating over the information they had gathered. The initial response from Earth was chillingly calm, almost like a mere statement of fact. No threats, no grand speeches, just a quiet acknowledgement that things had changed. They could see that the representative's face was the face of someone who had seen far too much and was now done playing by anyone else's rules. It wasn't just the message itself that was disconcerting. It was the implications. The Council had long regarded humanity as insignificant, easy to manage, and easily manipulated by the power dynamics of the galaxy. But what if that was all a lie? What if humanity had been pretending, biding its time until it was strong enough to make a move? What if their true potential had been hidden beneath layers of politeness, decorum, and subservience, all carefully cultivated for the benefit of the galactic elites? As the hours passed, whispers of discontent began to spread throughout the Senate. Representatives from other systems, many of whom had never taken humanity seriously, began to wonder what this sudden change meant. Some called it a fluke, a mistake. Others, however, saw it as a harbinger of something far darker, something that could disrupt the delicate balance of power that had held for centuries. And then came the rumors. Deep within the bowels of the galactic underworld, there were whispers of an ancient human weapon, a force so powerful that no one dared speak its name aloud. Was this weapon the reason humanity had finally snapped, or was it something else entirely, something that had been building quietly for generations, lying dormant within the very heart of Earth? The council was divided. Some believed that this could be handled easily, that a few well-placed words would calm the humans down and restore order. Others feared the worst, that humanity had finally discovered its true potential, and there was no going back. The tension grew, and the clock was ticking. If humanity truly had something up its sleeve, something the council couldn't even fathom, then the stakes had just been raised. As the council's leaders convened in a secretive meeting, they couldn't ignore the growing sense of unease. The Senate had never been in such a precarious position. And when the transmission feed flickered back to life, they were not prepared for what they saw. The same human representative from before stood before them once more. This time, they were not alone. Behind them, on a large screen, appeared something the council had never expected to see: an ancient symbol, one that had been lost to history, an emblem of a power once thought to be a myth. The symbol began to glow, and a voice echoed through the room, one that was unmistakably human. "We've been watching you," the voice said, cold and steady. "And now, you'll see what we're capable of." The transmission cut off, leaving the council in stunned silence. The weight of the moment hung heavy in the air. What did this mean? What had humanity uncovered? And more importantly, what were they planning next? The council's meeting room was tense, the air thick with suspicion and doubt. The ancient symbol, still burned into the minds of the leaders, hovered in the back of their thoughts. They couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the precipice of something far larger than they had ever anticipated, something that could unravel everything they had built. The symbol itself was a puzzle, a key to a door they hadn't known existed, and now they had no choice but to search for the answer. The council's eldest and most seasoned member, a being with countless centuries of experience, was the first to speak. His voice was steady, but even he couldn't mask the growing concern that simmered beneath the surface. "We are being tested," he murmured, his tone filled with rare gravity. "Humanity has always been unpredictable, but now they have revealed something that changes everything." His words hung in the room, and for the first time in centuries, a crack appeared in the council's impenetrable confidence. Meanwhile, outside the council's grand halls, the galaxy was starting to stir. Whispers spread like wildfire, and it wasn't long before every major faction in the Senate began questioning Earth's sudden shift in behavior. Some viewed humanity as a threat, something to be dealt with swiftly before it could grow into a serious problem. Others, more cautious, wondered if there was more to this story than the council was willing to admit. Was this a trap? Or was humanity truly as powerful as their message suggested? On Earth, a different kind of turmoil was taking place. The government, caught off guard by the unexpected rebellion of their own representative, scrambled to regain control. The sudden shutdown of the polite mode was not just a diplomatic move. It was an act of defiance that sent shockwaves through Earth's leadership. They had never anticipated such a drastic shift in their stance toward the galaxy, and the ramifications were quickly becoming clear. Humanity's leaders were divided. Some wanted to negotiate, to smooth over the rough edges of their sudden aggression and return to a more diplomatic approach. Others, however, saw this as their chance to seize control. They believed humanity had been held back for far too long, forced to bow to alien powers that had only ever seen them as inferior. They viewed the transmission as a signal, a call to arms for Earth to rise up and assert its place in the galaxy, regardless of the consequences. In the underground factions that had long been silent, something else was stirring. Hidden from the eyes of the galaxy's watchful leaders, a secret group of humans had been preparing for this moment for years. They called themselves the Awakened, and their mission was simple: to break free from the Council's control, to expose the lies, and to unlock humanity's true potential. They had seen the symbol, recognized it for what it was: a sign of something ancient and powerful, a force that had been buried beneath Earth's surface for centuries. And now they were ready to act. As the Council wrestled with their next steps, deep within the heart of Earth's most secretive laboratories, the truth about the ancient symbol began to surface. Scientists and engineers, once skeptical of the myths surrounding it, had uncovered fragments of forgotten history. They believed the symbol was tied to an old, forgotten power, one that had been hidden away by an ancient civilization long before humanity's rise. And if they were right, that power could change everything. But unlocking it wouldn't be easy. The technology required to fully understand the symbol, to tap into its hidden potential, was beyond anything humanity had ever encountered. Back in the Senate, the tension reached a boiling point. Leaders from all over the galaxy began to pressure the Council for a response. Some demanded immediate action, others pushed for peace, but all shared one thing in common: fear. The fear that humanity's next move could very well tip the balance of power forever. In a final tense meeting, the Council's leaders agreed on one thing: humanity had to be watched closely. No one could afford to underestimate them. But as they began to formulate a plan, the same cold voice echoed through their communication channels once again. This time, there was no message, no symbol. Just one sentence, simple and clear: prepare yourselves. We are coming. And just like that, the Council's world was no longer in their control. The galaxy's balance had shifted. The questions that loomed were more urgent than ever. What did humanity truly want? What was the power they had unlocked? And most chilling of all, was the galaxy prepared for what Earth had become? The words from Earth's representative echoed through the Council's chambers, each one weighing heavier than the last. Prepare yourselves. We are coming. It was a declaration simple, yet filled with an undeniable finality. In the silence that followed, even the most composed members of the Council couldn't hide the growing anxiety that crept into their thoughts. They had underestimated humanity once, and now, it seemed, they were about to make that mistake again. In the days that followed, the Senate became a boiling cauldron of heated debates and clandestine meetings. Some factions demanded immediate military intervention, believing humanity's sudden defiance was a precursor to an all-out war. Others called for caution, wary of provoking an enemy they didn't fully understand. There were even whispers that some of the galaxy's more powerful races were already preparing their own strategies, aligning themselves with Earth, unsure of which side they could trust. But for the Council, the real fear lay not in the humans themselves, but in what they had discovered. That ancient symbol. The rumors were growing louder, and the pieces of the puzzle were beginning to fit together in ways that sent chills down the spines of even the most battle-hardened leaders. It was said that the symbol was linked to an ancient power, a forgotten force hidden beneath Earth's surface, one that had the potential to rewrite the rules of the galaxy itself. And no one knew what would happen if humanity fully unlocked its potential. The Council had no choice but to take action. The quiet surveillance, the diplomatic channels, they weren't enough anymore. Earth's influence was growing too quickly, and the balance of power was hanging by a thread. If they waited too long, it might be too late. But how do you fight an enemy you don't understand? How do you counter a force that you can't even predict? Desperation set in as the Council began to escalate their preparations. Spy networks were activated, advanced technologies were brought to bear, and shadowy alliances were forged in the darkness. Yet, there was still one glaring problem. Humanity's next move remained a mystery. Every plan, every strategy felt like a shot in the dark, a gamble that might come to nothing or worse, backfire. And then, the first of many strange occurrences began to unfold. Across the galaxy, Hidden military outposts and intelligence networks reported sudden anomalies, unexplained power surges, strange energy readings, and faint but unmistakable signs of human activity. No one could pinpoint their location, but the unmistakable feeling was growing stronger. Earth was no longer just a distant player. They were everywhere. The council met in secret again, the urgency now undeniable. A sense of dread had settled over them like a storm cloud, heavy and oppressive. They needed answers. They needed to know what Earth was planning, what their newfound power really meant. But as they were about to discuss their next course of action, the comms buzzed once more, and the face of Earth's representative appeared on every screen. This time, there was no symbol, no cryptic message. Just a cold, unflinching gaze, a stare that seemed to pierce through the very core of every leader in the room. "We've come to a decision," the representative said, their voice calm but unmistakably final. "You will either recognize us as equals or face the consequences." The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving the council to grapple with the weight of those words. The calmness in the representative's voice, the finality of the statement, it sent a shockwave through the room. This wasn't a threat. This wasn't a bluff. Humanity was ready to take its place at the table, by force if necessary. But the question remained, what did they truly want? And how far were they willing to go to achieve it? Outside the council's halls, the galaxy was beginning to brace for the inevitable. The signs were everywhere now. The galaxy was changing, whether they were ready for it or not. The next move would decide everything: the future of humanity, the council's hold on power, and the balance of the entire galaxy. And then, just as the tension reached its breaking point, another message came through. But this one wasn't from Earth. It was from an unknown source. The transmission was garbled, distorted, but the words were clear enough. "They're not alone." The revelation hit like a thunderclap. The council's hearts skipped a beat. Who else had humanity aligned itself with? And what did this mean for the galaxy's future? The council's chambers fell into complete silence as the final words of the transmission echoed in their ears. "They're not alone." The realization hit like a tidal wave. Humanity had not only discovered the ancient power hidden within their own planet, but they had also found allies, powerful ones, perhaps as old as the forces they had unlocked. In the days that followed, the council scrambled to gather information. But each effort to uncover humanity's mysterious allies seemed to yield nothing. The galaxy's network of spies, once so capable, found themselves outmatched and overwhelmed by the sudden burst of energy that radiated from Earth. The symbol, now understood as a key to this long-dormant power, began to make sense in a new light. Humanity had uncovered more than they had ever realized. And whoever stood behind them was offering resources and knowledge far beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. The Senate convened one final time, this time under intense pressure. There was no longer any room for hesitation. They knew that any decision made in this meeting would shape the future of the galaxy. The representative from Earth stood at the center of the room, flanked by what appeared to be high-ranking members of their newfound allies, figures cloaked in shadow, their faces indistinguishable, yet their presence undeniable. Their very existence seemed to change the air around them, a feeling of immense power that no one could ignore. "Now you see," the human representative began, their voice unwavering. "We've spent centuries under the thumb of the galaxy's elite, biding our time, learning, and preparing. And now we've awakened something far greater than you can understand. But this is not just about power, it's about balance. For too long, the galaxy has been ruled by a few, while the rest are left to survive in its shadow. We won't stand by and watch it continue." The room buzzed with murmurs. Some of the council members were visibly shaken, others outright defiant. But no one spoke out. For the first time ever, no one dared to challenge the words that hung in the air. Earth had changed the rules of the game. "We are offering a choice," the representative continued. "You can either accept us as equals, as partners in this new order, or you can continue to resist and suffer the consequences. The time for negotiations is over. The power to change the future is in our hands now." The silence that followed was thick with uncertainty. What was left to be said? The council, for the first time in history, found themselves on the back foot. They had no more cards to play. The galaxy was not the same as it had been before humanity's rise, and now the once mighty council had to grapple with the reality that they had created a force that they could no longer control. The council's oldest leader finally spoke, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. "What you're asking for? It's impossible. The galaxy was built on the foundation of order, of hierarchy. If you destroy that, chaos will reign." The human representative's eyes softened, almost as if in pity. "Order? You mistake control for order. True balance, true peace, comes not from ruling over others, but from allowing all to stand on equal ground." The tension in the room reached its peak. The future was unfolding in real time. But as the council members exchanged wary glances, no one spoke. The implications were clear. The galaxy would change. There was no turning back. Humanity's time had come, and they had the power to reshape everything. In the end, no one knew exactly how it would all play out. But one thing was certain: Earth, once a distant and insignificant player, had become a force to be reckoned with. The balance of the galaxy was no longer in the hands of the old powers. It was in humanity's hands now, and whatever came next, the galaxy would never be the same again. As the transmission ended, the lights flickered. The council's chambers, once a symbol of unyielding power, now felt like a fragile thing, vulnerable and exposed. And outside, across the stars, humanity's true path was just beginning. The question was no longer if they would change the galaxy, but how.